A millionaire, tired of being seen only for his last name, decides to disappear. But on the streets, where no one knows him, he discovers something money could never buy. How far does someone have to fall before they're finally seen? The champagne tasted like nothing. Alexander Turner stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Turner Gardens Hotel, 43rd floor, watching the city lights blur into amber lines. Behind him, voices overlapped. Executives congratulating each other, investors measuring futures in percentages, women in silk dresses laughing at jokes that weren't funny. The opening gala was perfect. Everything had been perfect for 38 years. He lifted the glass to his lips again, but didn't drink. The bubbles had gone flat. Alexander, a hand on his shoulder. Gerald Whitman, Senior VP of Development, smiling too wide. Hell of a property. Your father would have been proud. Thank you, Gerald. You look tired. Long week. Something like that? Gerald moved on. Another handshake. Another face he'd seen 100 times, but couldn't remember caring about. Alexander turned back to the window. Down below, taxis moved through gridlock. Delivery trucks idled at red lights. People crossed streets without looking up. The city was alive in ways this room would never be. He thought about his father's funeral 3 years ago. The line of mourners had stretched through 2 rooms. Businessmen, politicians, socialites, all speaking about James Turner like they'd known him. But when Alexander had tried to remember his father's voice, all he'd heard was boardroom directives. Results matter, sentiment doesn't. The chandelier above reflected in the glass, distorting his face into something unrecognizable. He left the gala early. His driver, Marcus, waited by the Lincoln Town car, door already open. Alexander slid into leather seats that smelled like cologne and resignation. They drove north through Midtown, past the theater district, through the quieter blocks of the Upper West Side. He lived in a penthouse on Central Park West. 12 rooms, marble countertops, a view people paid millions for. It felt like a mausoleum. Inside, he poured scotch he didn't want and sat in the dark. The question came quietly, the way dangerous thoughts always do. If I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone notice me? Or just the money? He thought about the gala, the automatic smiles, the way people leaned in when he spoke, not because they cared, but because disagreeing was expensive. He thought about Janet, his ex-wife, who'd left 2 years ago because you're never actually here, Alexander. He thought about his mother, Helen, who called quarterly earnings reports family updates. He finished the scotch, poured another. By morning, the plan had formed with the cold precision of a business strategy. He would walk away from his name, his title, his tailored suits, walk into the city as no one, test what people saw when power wasn't part of the equation. He didn't want to live on the streets. He wanted to measure decency when there was nothing to gain from it. He opened his laptop and searched for thrift stores in the Bronx. The subway smelled like urine and fried food. Alexander sat on the orange plastic seat, knees pressed against the pole, watching a woman across from him argue into her phone. She wore scrubs with coffee stains, her voice hoarse from a double shift. No one looked at him. No one looked at anyone. He'd shaved unevenly that morning, nicking his jaw. The jeans from the Goodwill on Fordham Road hung loose at the waist, held up by a fraying belt. The hoodie, gray with a bleach stain on the sleeve, smelled like someone else's detergent. He'd left his Rolex in the apartment safe, traded his leather shoes for scuffed Adidas knockoffs. His phone was off, buried at the bottom of a backpack that contained $50 in small bills, a subway pass, and a bottle of water. He looked down at his hands. Clean. Too clean. He rubbed them against the seat until grime darkened the lines of his palms. The train lurched to a stop at Union Square. He got off. The station was cold, despite the August heat. He walked up the stairs into the park, where skaters practiced tricks near the pavilion, and a man with a guitar case open on the ground played Redemption Song off-key. Alexander found a bench near the dog run and sat down. His back ached almost immediately. The wooden slats pressed into his spine. He shifted, trying to find comfort, but the bench wasn't designed for rest. It was designed to keep people moving. By evening, his hunger had become a presence. He bought a hot dog from a cart near 14th Street, ate it standing up. The vendor didn't make eye contact. Alexander counted out crumpled singles, received no change, no acknowledgement. It was the first transaction in years where no one had said his name. Night came slowly. He returned to the bench. Two security officers appeared around 11, shining flashlights into faces, asking people to move along. Alexander stood and walked. He ended up near the East Village, sitting on the steps of a closed pharmacy, watching cabs pass. His body was tired in unfamiliar ways. His feet, his lower back, the space between his shoulder blades. He hadn't realized sitting could be work. At some point, he dozed. When he woke, the sky was gray with pre-dawn light. He walked south, crossed Houston Street, wandered into neighborhoods he'd only seen from car windows. He passed bodegas opening their metal gates, men unloading bread into bakery basements, a woman sweeping the sidewalk in front of a nail salon. No one looked twice at him. He was invisible. By mid-morning, he stood outside the Turner Gardens Hotel in Brooklyn. The building rose 12 stories, all glass and steel, with a rooftop bar that had been featured in Architectural Digest. Alexander had attended the groundbreaking 2 years ago, posed for photos with the mayor. Now he leaned against the low stone wall across the street, exhausted, trying to catch his breath. Two security guards emerged from the lobby. "Sir." The first guard was young, maybe 25, with close-cropped hair and a name tag that read J. Mitchell. "You can't stay here." Alexander looked up. The guard's face was familiar. Someone who'd shaken his hand at a company event, thanked him for the Christmas bonus. Now the man stared at him like he was debris. "I'm just resting," Alexander said. "Yeah, well, you need to rest somewhere else." The second guard, older, crossed his arms. "Guests are complaining." "I'm not doing anything." "Doesn't matter. You're making people uncomfortable." Alexander stood slowly, his knees stiff. He wanted to say, "I own this building." Instead, he nodded and walked away. Behind him, he heard the older guard speak into his radio. "Night manager wants the area cleaned. Doesn't want it looking bad for morning check-in." The humiliation sat in his chest like swallowed glass. He walked east for 20 minutes, thirst making his head ache. Brooklyn stretched endlessly. Brownstones, dollar stores, laundromats, churches advertising Sunday service in 4 languages. He stopped at a corner where a food truck was parked, its metal sides painted with bright letters. Taco de la Abuela. A woman stood inside, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, her hands moving quickly over a griddle. She looked up. "What can I get you?" Alexander hesitated. The menu was handwritten on a chalkboard. Tacos, quesadillas, lemonade, prices lower than they should be. "1 taco," he said. "Carne asada. Anything to drink?" "Water's fine." She nodded, assembled the taco with practiced efficiency. Corn tortilla warmed on the griddle, meat, onions, cilantro, a squeeze of lime. She wrapped it in foil, placed it on the counter. Then she poured lemonade into a plastic cup larger than he'd asked for. $3.50, she said. He pulled out a handful of coins, counted slowly. Her eyes followed his hands. "Actually," she said, "that taco broke when I was wrapping it. $2. Alexander looked up. She was watching him, not with pity, but with something steadier. Recognition, maybe. She knew what it meant to count coins. "Thank you," he said. She nodded once, turned back to the griddle. He ate standing beside the truck, the taco still warm through the foil. The meat was seasoned with cumin and chili, the tortilla slightly charred. It was the best thing he'd tasted in months. When he finished, he walked back to the window. The woman was cleaning the griddle, her movements methodical. "That was really good," he said. She glanced over her shoulder. "Thanks. My father's recipe." "You run this yourself?" "With help." She gestured toward a small girl sitting on a folding chair behind the truck, coloring in a workbook. The girl looked up, smiled shyly, then returned to her drawings. Alexander wanted to ask more, but didn't. Instead, he said, "I'll come back." "Suit yourself," the woman said. Not unkind, just realistic. He returned the next day, and the day after that. Lucia Ramirez noticed the man in the faded hoodie before he spoke. He stood near the truck at 11 in the morning, hands in his pockets, watching her work. There was something off about him. Too careful, too quiet. She'd seen enough drifters to know when someone was performing. "Same as yesterday?" she asked. "Yeah, please." She made the taco, this time charging full price. He paid without hesitation, counting out exact change. He ate slowly, leaning against the side of the truck, and when he finished, he didn't leave. "You need something?" Lucia asked. "Just—" He hesitated. "Can I ask what you're working on?" She looked down at the clipboard in her hands, where she tracked daily expenses in neat columns. "Inventory, making sure I didn't lose money this week." He nodded. "You do this every day?" "Twice a day, morning and evening." "That's smart." She studied him. "You got business experience or something?" "Some," he said. "I used to work in, logistics." Logistics. Lucia didn't believe him, but she didn't press. "Well, logistics or not, running a food truck is harder than it looks." "I believe that." She turned back to the griddle. A moment later, she heard him say, "I could help, if you need it." Lucia's hand tightened on the spatula. She turned slowly. "Help how?" "Loading, unloading, whatever you need. I'm not asking for money, just—" He stopped. "That taco you gave me yesterday. I'd like to pay it back." She studied his face, looking for angles. Men always had angles, but his eyes were steady, tired in a way that wasn't chemical. "You don't touch cash," she said finally. "You don't talk to customers, and you stay away from my daughter." "Understood. And if I say leave, you leave. Deal." He showed up the next morning before she'd finished unloading crates from her van. Without speaking, he picked up a box of tomatoes and carried it to the truck. Then another. Then the case of bottled water. Lucia watched, suspicious, but he worked quickly and didn't complain. By the end of the week, she'd learned his name, or the name he gave her. "Alex," he said, and didn't offer a last name. Alex, though Lucia still wasn't sure that was his real name, learned the rhythms of the food truck like someone translating a foreign language. He folded the awning without being asked, strapped down crates so they wouldn't shift during transport, sorted the recycling into 3 separate bins because that's how Lucia wanted it. He didn't talk much. That was fine. Lucia preferred silence to small talk, but she noticed things. The way he watched her negotiate with the produce supplier, his attention sharp when she explained why she paid in cash. No credit card fees, better prices, immediate trust. The way he studied her handwritten cash book, his brow furrowing at the tight margins. The way he seemed surprised when she ran out of change and had to close early, losing an hour of peak sales. "You ever think about going digital?" he asked one afternoon, wiping down the counter. "With what money?" Lucia said. "Square charges, fees. I'd lose 20 cents on every transaction." "There are cheaper systems." "I'm sure there are." She didn't look up from the griddle. "But right now, this works." He nodded, didn't push. Bella, her daughter, watched Alex with cautious curiosity. She was 8, small for her age, with asthma that flared in the summer heat. Lucia had taught her to be careful around strangers, but Bella seemed to sense that Alex wasn't dangerous, just sad. One afternoon, when Lucia was dealing with a difficult customer, Bella showed Alex her coloring book. He knelt beside her chair, studied the half-finished picture of a castle. "That's really good," he said. "It's supposed to be purple," Bella said, holding up a broken crayon. "But I only have blue left." Alex looked at the drawing. "Blue works. Looks like it's nighttime, like the princess is awake when everyone else is asleep." Bella tilted her head, considering. Then she smiled. "Yeah, she's magic." Lucia glanced over, saw them sitting there. Alex crouched low, Bella explaining her drawing. Something softened in her chest, just slightly. That evening, after they'd closed and loaded the van, Lucia handed Alex an envelope. Inside was $40. "What's this?" he asked. "Payment. You've been working all week." "I told you, I'm not—" "Take it," Lucia said, her voice firm. "I don't like owing people." He looked at the money, then at her. "Okay. Thank you." She nodded, climbed into the van. Alex stayed on the sidewalk, the envelope in his hand, watching her drive away. Later that night, sitting on a bench near Prospect Park, Alexander opened the envelope and counted the bills. $40. A week's labor. Less than he spent on a single lunch in Midtown. He folded the money carefully and put it in his pocket. For the first time in years, he felt like he'd earned something real. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, taped to the side of the food truck. Lucia saw it when she pulled up to her usual spot on Atlantic Avenue, a corner with steady foot traffic from the nearby offices and the subway entrance. The envelope was official, city seal, certified mail sticker, and her name was typed across the front. Her hands shook as she opened it. Notice of temporary relocation. East Line Redevelopment Initiative, effective September 15th. She read it twice, then a third time. The block where she parked was scheduled for revitalization. Construction would begin in 3 weeks. All mobile vendors were required to relocate to designated zones. A list of addresses followed, all in low-traffic areas far from her current customers. The notice offered a form to apply for transitional business support, but the language was vague, bureaucratic. No guarantees. Bella was at school. Mrs. Ramirez, Lucia's mother, was at home waiting for a follow-up call about her cataract surgery. Medicaid approved, but delayed twice already. Lucia leaned against the truck, the paper crumpling in her grip. She didn't cry. She learned years ago that tears didn't fix problems. Alex arrived 20 minutes later. He saw her face immediately. What happened? She handed him the notice without speaking. He read it slowly, his jaw tightening. When he finished, he looked up. When did you get this? This morning. 3 weeks, he said, his voice flat. That's not enough time. No shit. Lucia took the paper back, folded it, shoved it into her pocket. They want me gone. That's what this is. Who's behind it? She pulled out her phone, searched the project name. The website loaded. Glossy images of a new retail plaza, green spaces, community-focused development. At the bottom, the developer's name, Turner & Sons Development Group, in partnership with NYC Department of City Planning. Doesn't matter who, Lucia said. Money always wins. Alex stared at the screen, his face unreadable. You okay? Lucia asked. Yeah. He handed the phone back. I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. His hands were shaking. That afternoon, Lucia worked mechanically, serving customers without her usual warmth. Alex loaded crates in silence. When they closed early, Lucia, too distracted to stay open, he helped her pack the van. I know someone, he said finally. Lucia looked at him. Someone who deals with small business stuff. Permits, loans, legal navigation. I can set up a meeting. I don't have money for a lawyer. It's not a lawyer. It's a consultant. Through a nonprofit. They help people like you. People like me, Lucia repeated, her voice sharp. I didn't mean... Alex stopped. I just mean people dealing with city bureaucracy. She studied him. Why would you do that? Because I can. Lucia wanted to refuse. Pride told her to refuse, but pride didn't pay for her mother's surgery or Bella's inhaler refills. Fine, she said. Set it up. The meeting took place in a community center in Bed-Stuy, a room with fluorescent lights and a folding table. The consultant, a woman named Patricia Okafor, mid-50s, West African accent, listened while Lucia explained her situation. Alex sat beside her, quiet, taking notes on the back of a napkin. Patricia was direct. You have rights, but enforcing them requires documentation. Proof of established business, customer loyalty, financial records. Lucia had kept meticulous records, receipts, inventory logs, the cash book Alex had noticed. She spread them across the table. Patricia nodded. This is good. Very good. We can file an appeal, argue economic hardship, request an extension, maybe negotiate better relocation terms. How long does that take? 2 months, minimum. Maybe longer. I don't have 2 months. Then we work. Fast. Patricia looked at Alex. You said you'd help with documentation? Yes. Over the next week, Alex photographed the food truck from every angle, compiled a portfolio of reviews from Yelp and Google, drafted a petition that regular customers signed enthusiastically. He worked quietly, methodically, staying late after Lucia closed to organize files on a laptop he'd borrowed. Actually, his own laptop, stripped of personal information. He also used some of his hidden cash to buy Lucia a new canopy, stronger, waterproof, with reinforced poles. When she saw it, she frowned. Where did this come from? I told you. I know people. Consider it an investment. You can pay me back when business picks up. Lucia wanted to argue, but the rainy season was coming. She needed the canopy. Okay, she said finally, but I'm paying you back. I know. One night, while filing paperwork, Alex found himself staring at the project name again. East Line Redevelopment Initiative. He opened his phone, logged into his encrypted email, carefully on a public Wi-Fi network, and pulled up the development brief. His signature was on page 12. Authorization. Alexander J. Turner, CEO, Turner & Sons Holdings. Project timeline, aggressive. Rationale, Q3 earnings enhancement. He closed the laptop. Lucia noticed. You all right? Yeah, he lied. Just tired. But the truth was spreading through him like cold water. Alexander couldn't sleep. He lay on a bench in McCarran Park, staring at the sodium lights through the trees, his mind cycling through the same calculations. The East Line Initiative had been Edward Shaw's idea, CFO, his mother's right hand, a man who measured success in quarterly reports. The project promised to boost property values, attract chain retailers, generate revenue that would satisfy investors. It also promised to displace 23 mobile vendors, 4 family-owned bodegas, and a used bookstore that had operated for 30 years. Alexander had signed off on it without reading the full impact report. He sat up, his back aching. Across the park, a man walked a dog, the leash slack between them. Normal life. Simple. He thought about Lucia's hands, calloused, efficient, never still. He thought about Bella, asthmatic and quiet, drawing castles in her coloring book. He thought about Mrs. Ramirez waiting for a surgery that Medicaid kept delaying. And he thought about his own signature, authorizing their erasure. The next morning, he called Patricia Okafor from a payphone. It's Alex, he said. I need the full list of businesses affected by Eastline. Patricia hesitated. Why? Because I want to help. She emailed him the list. 27 businesses total, all small, all vulnerable. Alexander read through every name, every address. Then he did something he hadn't done in 2 weeks. He called his assistant, Rebecca. Mr. Turner? Her voice was startled. Where have you been? Your mother's been. I need you to pull the complete Eastline file, everything. Community impact reports, timelines, financial projections. Send it to my personal email. Don't tell anyone. Sir, I don't think... Rebecca, please. A pause. Okay. The file arrived an hour later. Alexander sat in a library in Williamsburg scrolling through pages of data. The numbers were clean, efficient, profitable. The human cost was buried in footnotes. Estimated displacement, 27 small businesses. Recommended relocation assistance, $5,000 per vendor. Projected timeline for alternative site identification, 18 to 24 months. $5,000 to rebuild a life. He read the executive summary, written by Edward Shaw. Minor short-term disruption. Long-term neighborhood enhancement. Board approval recommended. His mother had written in the margin, approved. Move forward aggressively. Alexander closed the laptop and pressed his palms against his eyes. When he returned to the food truck that evening, Lucia was arguing with a man in a suit, another vendor from down the block, comparing relocation notices. They were both angry, both scared. Alex waited until the man left. We got the appeal filed, Lucia said. Patricia thinks we have a decent shot. That's good. You don't sound convinced. He looked at her. Lucia, I need to tell you something. What? He almost said it. Almost confessed everything. But cowardice won. Just don't give up, okay? She frowned. I'm not planning to. 2 days later, Alexander walked into the Turner & Sons headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. He'd showered at a gym, borrowed clothes from a storage unit he'd rented under a false name, a suit still wrinkled but presentable. The security guard in the lobby did a double take. Mr. Turner, I need to see Edward Shaw. Sir, Mr. Shaw isn't expecting... Now. The guard picked up the phone. Edward was in a meeting on the 32nd floor, but he came out when he heard Alexander was in the building. He looked annoyed, then concerned. Jesus Christ, Alexander, where the hell have you been? I need to talk about Eastline. Edward's expression hardened. In my office. They walked down the corridor in silence. Inside Edward's office, glass walls, view of the Hudson, Alexander sat without being invited. I want to suspend the project, Alexander said. Edward stared. What? Suspend Eastline, redesign the transition, give the vendors real support. Are you out of your mind? 27 businesses, Edward, families. We're destroying them for a retail plaza that'll be half empty in 3 years. You approved this project. I know. I was wrong. Edward leaned back in his chair. You've been gone for 2 weeks. Now you show up, looking like you slept in a dumpster and you want to derail a project that's already in motion? Do you know what that'll do to our stock price? I don't care about the stock price. Well, your mother does. And the board does. And every investor who's counting on Q3 returns. Alexander stood. Then I'll take it to the board myself. They'll vote you down. Maybe. Edward watched him for a long moment. What happened to you? Alexander didn't answer. He left the office, took the elevator down, walked out into the August heat. His phone, turned on for the first time in weeks, buzzed with messages. 37 from his mother, 12 from board members, 5 from journalists asking for comment on his absence. He ignored all of them and called Patricia Okafor. "It's Alexander Turner," he said. A long silence. "I'm sorry, who?" "The man who signed the East Line development order. I need to meet with you." Another silence, longer this time. "When?" "Now." They met at a diner in Brooklyn. Patricia arrived with Lucia. When Lucia saw Alexander, clean-shaven in a suit, her face went pale. "What the hell is this?" she said. "Sit down," Patricia said quietly. "Let's hear what he has to say." Alexander told them everything. His name, his company, the disguise, the 2 weeks on the street, the signature on page 12. When he finished, Lucia stood up. "You're the one doing this," she said, her voice shaking. "You're the one destroying my business. Yes? And you've been lying to me this whole time. Yes." She grabbed her bag. "Stay away from me. Stay away from Bella. Stay away from my family." "Lucia, don't." She looked at him like he was something rotten. "I don't care what you do with your guilt. I don't want your help." She left. The door swung shut behind her. Patricia watched Alexander. "What are you going to do now?" He looked down at his hands, clean again, manicured. "I'm going to fix it." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I will." Alexander resigned as CEO the next morning. The press release was brief. Due to irreconcilable differences regarding corporate direction and ethical priorities, Alexander Turner has stepped down as Chief Executive Officer of Turner & Sons Holdings. Effective immediately, he will remain on the board in an advisory capacity. The financial news networks ran the story all day. Bloomberg speculated about internal conflict. The Wall Street Journal interviewed analysts who predicted stock decline. His mother called 14 times. He didn't answer. Instead, he drafted a proposal. The document was 60 pages long, detailed, financially sound, and radically different from the original East Line plan. He proposed converting the development into a community market, affordable vendor stalls, a cooperative food court, a covered pavilion with shared utilities. The construction timeline would extend by 8 months. The profit margin would shrink by 40%, but the displacement would stop. He sent the proposal to every board member, including his mother. Then he waited. Helen Turner arrived at his apartment 2 days later. She didn't knock. She had a key, of course. Alexander was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, when she walked in. "Have you lost your mind?" she said. "No. You've destroyed your career, humiliated this family. For what? A food truck? For 27 businesses and their families." Helen sat down across from him. She was 71, steel gray hair pulled back, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Your father built this company on discipline," she said, "on making hard choices. You think he got sentimental about progress? I think he forgot that progress is supposed to mean something. Progress means profit. That's the only measure that matters." Alexander met her eyes. "Then I don't want to be part of it anymore." Helen stood. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Alexander said, "but I'll regret the alternative more." She left without another word. The board meeting took place a week later. Alexander presented his proposal in a conference room where he'd once felt untouchable. Now he felt exposed, uncertain, but he spoke clearly. Edward Shaw opposed him immediately. "This is financial suicide. We'll lose investor confidence. We'll gain community trust," Alexander countered. "Long-term value. Community trust doesn't pay dividends." "No, but it builds something that lasts." The vote was close. 5 in favor, 4 against. Helen abstained, her face unreadable. The revised East Line plan was approved. Edward Shaw was removed as CFO 3 days later, after an internal audit revealed he'd been inflating projections and offering unethical incentive bonuses to contractors. Helen called Alexander that night. "I still think you're wrong," she said, "but I respect the integrity." It was the closest she'd ever come to an apology. Rebuilding trust was harder than demolishing it. Lucia refused his calls. She blocked his number. When he showed up at the food truck, she turned her back and kept working. Bella watched from her folding chair, confused. Mrs. Ramirez, who Lucia had finally told everything, looked at him like he was something dangerous. Alexander didn't blame them. Instead, he worked. He hired an independent nonprofit to manage a small business relocation fund, seeded with $2 million of his personal money. He met with City Hall, negotiated permits for a covered market street, 2 blocks from the original development site. He worked with architects to design vendor stalls that were affordable, weatherproof, and fully compliant with health codes. Patricia Okafor became the project coordinator. She was blunt in their first official meeting. "This doesn't erase what you did," she said. "I know. And some of these vendors won't forgive you. I know that too. So why are you doing it?" Alexander thought for a moment. "Because it's the right thing, and because I need to prove to myself that I can." The construction took 8 months. The market design went through 4 revisions, incorporating feedback from vendors who would actually use the space. Lucia's stall was approved early, rent-free for 6 months, with management training provided by the Small Business Association. She didn't accept at first. "I don't want his charity," she told Patricia. "It's not charity," Patricia said. "It's restitution, and it's independently managed. He doesn't control it." Lucia sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she said, "I'll think about it." 2 weeks later, she signed the lease. The East Line Community Market opened on a cold morning in March. The sky was overcast, threatening rain, but the covered pavilion kept the vendors dry. 23 stalls lined the central walkway, each one painted in bright colors chosen by the owners. Lucia's stall, Taco de la Abuela, was near the entrance with a new grill, a hand-painted sign, and a line of customers already forming. Bella stood beside her mother, reading the menu aloud to an elderly man who'd forgotten his glasses. Mrs. Ramirez arranged napkins in a wooden dispenser, her hands steady after the successful surgery. Alexander arrived like any other customer. He wore jeans and a plain jacket, no suit, no entourage. He waited in line. When he reached the counter, Lucia looked up. Her expression was unreadable. "What can I get you?" she asked. 2 tacos, carne asada." She nodded, made the tacos without speaking. When she handed them over, she said, $7. He paid, full price, no discount. "There's a table outside," Lucia said, "if you want." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Alexander sat at a metal table, ate his tacos slowly. They tasted exactly the same. Cumin, chili, lime. Simple and real. Across the market, vendors called to customers. Children ran between stalls. Music played from a portable speaker. It wasn't perfect. The market had problems. Parking was limited. Some stalls struggled with foot traffic. The city was already talking about rent increases after the grace period. But it was alive, and it belonged to the people who worked there. After he finished eating, Alexander walked back to Lucia's stall. She was busy with customers, but she saw him. He held up the empty foil wrapper. "Still the best tacos in Brooklyn." She almost smiled. "You're not wrong." He turned to leave, but she called after him. "Alex." He stopped. "Thank you," she said, "for fixing what you broke." He nodded. "I'm trying." "Keep trying." Over the following months, something unexpected began to grow. Not romance. Neither of them was ready for that, and maybe they never would be. But respect. Lucia joined the market's cooperative board, trained new vendors, and became a voice for fair practices. Alexander invested in 3 more community markets across the city, always through independent management, always with vendor input. They saw each other occasionally. He'd stop by for lunch. She'd ask his opinion on permit issues. Bella showed him a drawing she'd made of the market, and he framed it in his office. Helen. Turner visited the market once, walking through slowly, observing. Afterwards, she called Alexander. "It's smaller than I expected," she said. "It's not about size." "No," she admitted. "I suppose it's not." Edward Shaw started a consulting firm, humbled but functional. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt, but he learned to stop burning them. Lucia never fully forgave Alexander. But over time, the anger softened into something else, acknowledgement that people could change, that mistakes could be addressed, that dignity mattered more than perfection. One evening, a year after the market opened, Alexander sat at the metal table with a cup of Lucia's lemonade. Bella was doing homework nearby. Mrs. Ramirez was closing up for the night. Lucia brought over a taco. "On the house," she said, and sat across from him. They talked about business, rent, suppliers, the city's new health codes, normal things. And for the first time in years, Alexander felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, not because he'd saved anyone, but because he'd finally learned to see them. End.